Law of Attraction Talk Radio. Get ready to be the best you can be. Stay tuned for the Law of Attraction Talk Radio with Jules. Well, welcome to Law of Attraction Talk Radio. I'm Jules from beautiful, sunny, and refreshing Southern California, and I am so very, very pleased you could join us. We have got a great show for you tonight with Dr. Bernie Siegel. Now, for many, Bernie needs no introduction. He has touched many lives all over the planet. In 1978, he began talking about patient empowerment and the choice to live fully and die in peace. As a physician who's cared for and counseled many, many people whose mortality had been threatened by illness, Bernie embraces a philosophy of the mind-body connection, which has influenced the medical community into understanding the medical ethics and spiritual issues that grapples our society today. Welcome to Law of Attraction Talk Radio, Bernie. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, you're welcome.
Now, Bernie, you were the medical pioneer that introduced the mind-body connection to people through your book, Love, Medicine, and Miracles, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I am rereading my book, Love, Medicine, and Miracles, written 20 years ago, and I'm amazed in a sense at what's in it. Because I've been saying the same thing for 20, 30 years. What I wrote came out of my experience, and that as physicians we're just not trained in this area at all. And the interesting thing is, when I say as physicians, I met psychiatrists, psychotherapists who were into this in the sense of how helping people get their lives in order also help them physically. For instance, the psychiatrist Carl Menninger, when I wrote my book, said to me, he wrote a wonderful comment. He said he was writing a book, or about to, called 12 Hopeless Cases. And those were people that he saw as a psychiatrist, all of whom were told, they had a hopeless, incurable disease, and they're all perfectly well today. And he said, I don't have to write it, you've written it. And the interesting thing is that what I found, again, when I try to write articles, the medical journals refuse them as inappropriate. They said it's interesting, but it's inappropriate. When you send them to as appropriate, they said it's not interesting. We know this. And again, that was more into the psychotherapeutic areas. And I, in a sense, got angry because it was like, hey, I'm a doctor and nobody's told me all this. I worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, a psychiatrist. I did some drawings for her, and she told me about my life from the drawings. And I mean, a simple example is, she said, what are you covering up? I said, what are you talking about? She said, you've made snow on the mountain. I said, yeah, it's a mountain with snow. She said, no, the page is white. You took a white crayon and added another layer. So what are you covering up? And it was like, oh. and I was hiding all my pain and feelings and a whole host of things. And so I started doing drawings with patients. And it was amazing what you've learned literally about their body through symbols. And again, you come across Carl Jung, again, here's a psychiatrist who, I think it was 70 or 90 years ago, I can't, because I'm just rereading this, he listened to a dream that was presented to him at a conference, and he made a correct diagnosis of a brain tumor simply from this patient's dream. And again, you don't meet a medical student who's ever told, ask patients, what are they dreaming? It may tell you what's going on. And so, again, it really became exciting to me. And I think I caused trouble because I was a physician and a surgeon, meaning that Norman Cousins, did his thing. But, you see, a doctor could say, well, that's a story. It's Norman Cousins. How do we know he even had it? But when Siegel would get up, it was very confrontational. He's got an MD after his name. So I got on all the famous talk shows with everybody arguing with me. Because, again, when you say to a person, you see, studies have now been done, 2 examples. One is cancer patients who laugh live longer. The other was a study of loneliness. If you're lonely, it affects the genes that control immune function. So you can develop an autoimmune disease where it's overactive and attacks you, or you can develop cancer, but you're more likely to statistically, say, if you're lonely. And I always cite, even the poets knew this, you see, meaning that W.H. Auden wrote about a woman who develops cancer, and the doctor says to his wife, cancer's a funny thing. Childless women get it, and men when they retire, as if there had to be an outlet for their foiled creative fire. See, now when you recite that, an oncologist said to me, well, just because it rhymes doesn't mean it's true. But now studies show this. So, you know, and even the effect of a pet after a heart attack, that it dramatically reduces the mortality rate if you go home to a house with a dog after your heart attack versus a house without a dog. And again, all of this is scientific. It's about the chemistry of your body and the connections and relationships.
And when you started, you didn't have the benefit of all of those scientific studies. So I can imagine you had a very confrontational time. But even more important, thank goodness you stuck with it and you had the courage to keep on going, because it changed everything for us.
You know, it were things that I saw. And as you said, I didn't know that other people had seen this, written about it, or even studied it, because I was just sharing what I saw. And, you know, that's when doctors would again get angry. And I'd say, look, I'm telling you the truth. This is about a patient, I'm telling you. And they would say, I can't accept it. And I'd say, look, I could say that I can't understand it or I can't explain it. But why say you can't accept it? But again, if it isn't a part of your education, you just slam the door on it. You know, I always say quantum physicists and astronomers, they're dealing with uncertainty all the time, you know. They don't say, I can't accept that. You know, they study things because they don't have all the answers. But, you know, it's like you become an engineer or a doctor or whatever, you know, or an accountant, and you say, okay, here, we got all the answers. No, we don't have all the answers. So you have to live with an open mind and live from what you experience. Because when you're controlled by your beliefs, it again, slams the door. Say, I can't believe that. I can't accept it. But if you say, look what I've just noticed or experienced or seen, then your mind stays open.
You know, I remember back in 1987, I saw you speak at the Unity Church of the Palm Beaches in Florida. My husband had just been diagnosed with colon cancer a few years earlier, and fighting the cancer was absolutely devastating. But when I heard you speak, it was the first time I realized that we had become victims of cancer, and we absolutely needed to change our attitudes about it. Fortunately for me, I understood your message on a very profound level, but unfortunately for my husband, his fear was so huge about the C word, and he just couldn't grasp such a new concept, and he died. It was very confusing to him to think that he could possibly create such a devastating disease such as cancer. So that leads me to ask, even though I know completely that we do create our illness, how do you respond to people who may not understand that they create their cancer or their ill health?
Yeah, it's the biggest hurdle I saw then was the guilt, shame, and blame. And that's part of why I got a lot of criticism, because, see, I grew up with parents who loved me. I did well in school, and I get along with God. So I'm from a minority group, if you will. And so when I would say to somebody, what's happened the last year or two in your life, it wasn't, what did you do wrong? You know, you're to blame for getting your disease. It was, let's see what would have made you vulnerable now. Again, if it's Christopher Reeve's wife, you know, you'd hear that, oh, my husband is quadriplegic. Oh, that's going to affect you. Oh, I've retired. My son was killed in an accident. You know, these are things that we would then look at, work on, how does it affect your life, your emotions? You know, it's all the kids have left home. Who am I now? I'm not mama anymore. So it was helping people, in a sense, rebirth themselves, you know, recreate their lives.
Interesting.
also is looking at the emotional aspect or experience, that if you live in fear, it's destructive, what it does to your immune function and everything else. Whereas if you're in a growth phase, if you're loving, then it helps you to heal. And so all of these things enter into it. And I would often say to people, how would you describe what you were going through? Meaning that it's not colon cancer, it's, draining, fearful, failure, sucking, all these words that popped out of people. And then I'd say, all right, let's look at how those words fit your life. Then the disease, in a sense, became a guide and a teacher, and many of them would say, oh, it's a gift, it's a wake-up call, it's a new beginning.
To hear the rest of this wonderful interview, go to lawofattractiontools.com.